It's time.
Yes, welcome. As you can see from the title, never too early risers and red flags, because most people think about fantasy in August. Well, around here, we think about it now. Welcome into the Front Office Podcast. This is episode 3. I am your host, Pistols. This is where we evaluate the roles and the systems. So when draft season arrives, you guys are prepared. And we're not scrambling. It's not a reaction. We want to be prepared. We want to make draft day as easy as it comes. As I said, never too early, risers and red flags. This is what we're going on today. A few guys on the list. You guys are in for a real treat. Let's put it that way. As I said, I am your host for the evening. Welcome in, guys. Appreciate y'all for being here for the Front Office Podcast. Listen, we're not going to waste any time. We're going to get right into it. We're gonna chat about some fantasy football here. Welcome in, everybody. As you take your seats and get your popcorn ready. A couple of my early risers. Okay, like I said, we're not wasting any time. We don't like to waste time here. We like to get right into it. A couple of early guys. I had mentioned this guy last week, I think, in one of my fantasy winners section of the episode 2, which will be available on YouTube at PistolsLiveHQ on Tuesday. Episode 1 is already up on YouTube. You guys go check that out as well. Let's get to it. Chris Olave, my early riser. Guy should be flying up draft boards, in my opinion. I know the Saints were not really that good last year, but Chris Olave had some pretty solid numbers. He put up wide receiver 1 trajectory numbers, as they figured it out with the new quarterback, Tyler Shuck, kind of went in there and slinging the rock. Now, Chris Olave is a guy that I will admit I've tend to avoid it. It is so, Zags. Chris Olave is on the rise, man, and if you look at his numbers from last year, and I know we're not evaluating stats, we're evaluating the roles and the systems that they come from. But Chris Olave, he did top the 100 receptions, the 100 reception mark last year, which is more than last year, I think, or the year before that. 1,163 receiving yards down the stretch. Those are some pretty solid numbers for a team that struggled at quarterback early on and then kind of figured it out later on in the season. You got an older running back in Alvin Kamara in the backfield there who is definitely showing signs of slowing down. He's one of those guys that age is definitely catching up to him. For being a workhorse for so long, it's really hard for him to take on that volume, so the volume has to go elsewhere. And Tyler Shuck really started showing Chris Olave the target share, the volume that he deserved. He had 156 targets last year. That's a big number. That is very clear wide receiver 1 role numbers in an offense that's not very good. And us in the fantasy world, and I know Zags, you know this. Bad teams produce fantasy numbers because, especially for wide receivers, because they're always down. They have to throw the ball as much as they can to try and do anything. But really what I want to talk about too is his touchdown production. He had 9 touchdowns. Okay, that's more touchdowns than a lot of your big name guys. And we're gonna get to another guy in my red flag section when we get there, who didn't score at all and is a product of the system. I gave Zags a little sneak peek earlier on his stream. But yeah, Chris Olave is one of my early risers. He's definitely a guy we should be thinking about in the wide receiver 1 territory. He finished in the top 10 this year in fantasy production as far as fantasy points go. And Zag knows for sure. He's a guy that I've typically hated on. I've definitely avoided him, but I did have him in one of my fantasy leagues this year, and I saw a really good uptick in targets, and as I said, the target stats there. But really, one of the biggest things too is the volume will create the fantasy points, right? And Chris Olave was getting 11.6 yards per catch. That was what he was averaging per catch last year. And for those of you who keep track of scoring, that is a 2-point play. Okay, that is 2 points for the receiver every time he catches the ball if he sticks with that average, 11.6, depending on the style of league that you're in and the scoring league and everything. But yeah, for the most part, that is huge. That is big time. We'd like to see that in the fantasy world. We like to see that on our team. That helps you win games. When you get a guy that can score you 2 points per catch. Now think about it. If he gets 10 catches in a game, that's a pretty damn good fantasy day. Moving on to my next early riser. And this is a guy who saw a massive uptick in the running back one role for the Cincinnati Bengals, and that's Chase Brown. Chase Brown in 2025 had just over 1,000 yards. I know we'd like to see a little bit more than that, but he also added 232 receiving yards in the pass game. Chase Brown is a guy who is very clearly their number one back. They don't really have anybody behind him. I know you pair him with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and those guys in the receiving core, but when you have a guy that can put up those kind of numbers and average 4.6 yards a carry like Chase Brown did, those turned into fantasy points. 69 receptions in the passing game. That's a dual threat capabilities there, in my opinion. When you get a guy out of the backfield who is catching that many balls, that's huge for fantasy points, and that's what we look for here. We look to see, what role they have in their respective offenses and what they're going to do throughout the season. Chase Brown is a guy that they relied heavily on. He's a 3-down back who was on the field for pretty much the whole game, every game. He's a guy that you definitely want to look into drafting as your running back, as your RB1. Now, obviously, yeah, I agree. He's definitely going to fall because of the early season struggles last year. But I mean, if we just look at the Bengals were bad last year. They lost Joe Burrow for how many games, and Joe Flacco came in and tried to save them, but ultimately they missed the playoffs. But Chase Brown's value is, he's not a first round guy. He probably won't be, but for the value that you got last year out of him, if you get him in the second or third round, you're very, very happy as your RB1. And if you get him as an RB2, you're definitely happy. But yeah, 1,019 rushing yards, 4.6 yards per carry, 69 receptions, 232 receiving yards. Now, with 69 receptions, you would like to see that that receiving yardage go up a little bit, but for the most part, he's getting the targets out of the backfield, and that's really kind of what we're looking for, especially in an offense that really struggled. And for some reason, the Bengals still have a struggling offense with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins. I know Zags will know this, but we've seen the Bengals be the most boring offense in the league. They do have a very boring offense, but when it comes to fantasy points, the production value out of Chase Brown is right up there. I believe he finished in the top 10 in fantasy points last year. So Chase Brown is definitely a guy that is on my radar. I should be on your radar too. The last guy that I want to talk about before we move on to the red flags, Jaylen Warren. Jaylen Warren is another dual threat running back. He saw an uptick in his usage. Now, I know that he split a lot of carries with Kenneth Gainwell, but as we evaluate on the show, that could change if they don't re-sign Kenny Gainwell. He is a free agent this year, so we have to monitor and wait and see if he's actually even going to come back this year. But I know Jaylen Warren is going to be there. He had 211 carries this year, which is about 100 more than he had last year. Just under 1,000 yards, 958 rushing yards, but he also averaged 4.5 yards per carry. Now, his carries increased. His receiving stayed kind of steady throughout the season. He only had 40 receptions, but he turned it into 333 receiving yards. Now, the thing to monitor with Jaylen Warren is they do have a new head coach, and that's Mike McCarthy. And Mike McCarthy has been known to be an offensive-minded coach, and he is a coach that favors a heavy workload for running backs. We've seen it in the past when he was with Green Bay, and here's a name that didn't really last too long in the NFL, but Eddie Lacy saw like 12 or 1,300 yards rushing under Mike McCarthy. And then you bring in Aaron Jones, who had multiple 1,000-yard rushing seasons, and he was over the 1,300 yard mark too. But Jaylen Warren coming in with a new head coach and Mike McCarthy, and now we do have to monitor the Aaron Rodgers situation as well as the Kenny Gainwell situation. But Jaylen Warren, and he has the ability to put up running back one numbers, and where his draft value is probably in the RB2 area right now, which would be your round 3, round 4 type of guy after you get your big names out of the way. But again, we don't pay attention to the names here. We look at the situations and the systems that are changing and going on there. But Mike McCarthy has all the ability in the world to produce 1,000-yard rushers. As I said in the last episode, it's coaching changes, they don't create the talent. The talent's already there. They just create the role clarity. Okay. This is going to be a guy who's going to come in and he's going to use Jaylen Warren quite a bit in the rushing game. Yes, Gainwell ate a huge chunk of that. You're right, Zags. Absolutely. That's exactly what I'm saying. But Kenny Gainwell is a free agent, so we don't even know if he's coming back. Now, like I said, we're in February, guys. I understand that. So, I know that, we're looking at these and we're looking at stats and we're going, okay, great. But what was the situation there? You're right. Kenny Gainwell did eat a lot of the receiving yardage there. But 40 receptions, 333 receiving yards. Yeah, it's just Nate, appreciate you. But Jaylen Warren, if he is the feature back, Mike McCarthy's going to get him the ball, and that's really what it comes down to. If Kenny Gainwell doesn't re-sign there, which who knows? He's been a free agent a few times in his career, signed with various teams, and but he did have a really good, strong ending to the season in Pittsburgh, and they did go to the playoffs, and ultimately that playoff loss ended Mike Tomlin's tenure as their head coach. If Rodgers is gone in Pittsburgh, all that does is just solidify Jaylen Warren's RB1 capabilities. When you bring in a new quarterback, you especially if you don't really know what they're about, what their tendencies are, and it's just you just have to wait and see. And it's all speculation. Like I said, I know we're in February, but if the trend continues and Mike McCarthy does what he does as head coach, we're definitely going to see an uptick in Jaylen Warren's rushing. So that 211 carries might turn into 250 or almost 300. You would like to see closer to 300 for a guy that's going to be the feature back. You definitely want to see some more receiving yards, but as far as the fantasy, in the fantasy perspective, I loved having Jaylen Warren on my team. He played very, very well. Missed a couple games I think late in the season. But that's, you can't be scared of injuries. I'm not one to say that he's injury prone. Um, but yeah, as far as the fantasy, one of the biggest fantasy risers in my opinion is him is Jaylen Warren, and he's got an expanded role coming with Mike McCarthy coming in. So I really am curious to see where that is. I have no problem drafting Jaylen Warren as my RB2. Um, I mean, like I said, and if you draft him as an RB2 and he gives you RB1 numbers, then you're as happy as can be. Um, but 4.5 yards per carry is that's so every time he touches the ball, I mean, you're getting positive yards. So, that's another thing that we look out to. And when the efficiency meets, the role clarity, that's just where breakouts happen. And he's definitely on the list of guys that can, be top 5 in the league, up there with the best of them. Pickups for the Titans, as in what, Nate? Just free agents in general, or what are we talking about? So my early risers: Chris Olave, Chase Brown, Jaylen Warren. Really like those 3 guys. Really like what they brought to the table, especially late in the season for Olave. Chase Brown, again, he was late in the season too, especially when Burrow was not in. As far as the draft goes, I mean, the Titans, they need an edge rusher for sure, and they need to help that defense out. But as far as the offense goes, they can definitely pick up some veteran wide receivers to help those young guys, because I think the young guys in Tennessee are really good. Io Manor and DK played very, very well down the stretch. Now that they have Robert Saleh and Brian Daboll. Brian Daboll is a very good. It's a good question, Nate. But it's one of those things. Yes, they do. They need a legit wide receiver 1. And Calvin Ridley's not it. He's old. He's injury prone nowadays, and that just comes with age and being in the league as long as he has been. I know he had 1 year off when he got suspended for gambling, but he came back worse than he was when he left, and he's just not the answer for them. But with Brian Daboll is an incredible coach, and some of you might know Daboll from if you're a Bills fan. I know Zags doesn't really care. He's a casual Bills fan, but here in Buffalo, I mean, we loved what he did with Josh Allen. We loved what he did with he had Gabe Davis and kind of turned him into a legit receiver. And then Gabe Davis decided that he wanted to leave and go somewhere else and didn't do as well. But for the most part, yeah, they just need a legit wide receiver 1 to help out those young guys that they have. But let's get into the red flags here. This is going to be a good one. Red flags early on, coming on to last season, and something that needs to be brought up. Justin Jefferson is my biggest red flag, and it's not because he's not talented. We know Justin Jefferson is elite receiver. He's top tier, big body guy, contested catch guy, can stretch a field, but it is their quarterback situation that hinders him unbelievably. His talent is so immense that they need to figure out what to do with quarterback. JJ McCarthy was clearly not the answer. He had another injury riddled season. Didn't even play his first year because of an injury in the preseason. This year got hurt again. You saw them bring in Carson Wentz and didn't do really all that well either. They brought in some other I can't remember the kid's name, but some third string or fourth string quarterback. They still couldn't get Jefferson the ball. Yes, volume will turn into fantasy points, but in this situation, it is just a really bad quarterback room in Minnesota, and Justin Jefferson is it's really a shame because his talent should not be wasted, and I feel that it's going to be unless he seeks a trade. If he wants to be traded, if Minnesota even wants to trade him, I mean, there's a whole bunch of contract stuff that needs to get in there. if he goes to Buffalo, it's automatically a better situation when you have Josh Allen throwing the ball. And we talk about Josh Allen a lot, but yeah, Justin Jefferson. I mean, his numbers were way down. He finished outside, I think, the top 15 or top 20 in fantasy this year, which was crazy. After being, a few years ago, was drafted number 1 overall. 84 receptions, 1,048 yards. Here's the biggest thing, though: only 2 touchdowns this year. That just goes to show you that, and I don't think it's not a product of them not using him in the red zone. They just didn't get to the red zone this year. So the touchdowns are way down because of that. And we saw an uptick in Jordan Addison's production this year too. He's kind of their slot guy, their second receiver. So I don't know if it was because he was just an outlet, but Justin Jefferson's production, he may fall out of the first round, as he should, in my opinion. And you might not like my opinion, and that's fine, but that's okay, because it's like I said, it's still early. So, but Justin Jefferson is definitely on a not so much a talent slide. He's not on a downside in his talent, and yeah, and exactly. And JJ McCarthy's not a big arm guy. He's a quick 5-yard out guy and a quick take what's in the middle of the field guy. We saw production decrease across the board in Minnesota. Even, like I said, Addison did have a little bit of an uptick, but it wasn't anything spectacular. He still struggled. Their offense struggled a lot. Their defense is what held them in games quite a bit. I know they scored a bunch of touchdowns on defense as well. But yeah, Justin Jefferson is a guy that you should definitely be cautious with. You don't want to get him too early, because you're just going to be angry with yourself all season, because he's a guy that you draft so high. And fantasy players get this notion in their head that, oh my God, he's my high pick. He's my first round pick, or he's the first wide receiver I've taken. I have to play him every year. But knowing that situation in Minnesota is just, it's just a really bad situation for him. And it's really just a waste of his talent there in Minnesota, especially if they can't figure out the quarterback situation. And it's really hard for me to sit here and say that it's really hard for me to say that JJ McCarthy's just going to get it together in year 3. I don't really count year 1 because he was injured and didn't even play the whole season. Year 2 was technically his rookie season, because he did play, or he did start the season. So if you want to get technical, I guess it's not really his rookie season, but it might as well have been, since he didn't play his actual rookie season. But yeah, and Zags, and I'm sure you were just as pissed off as anybody who drafted him in the first round, because you thought Justin Jefferson is, one of those untouchable guys that it's Justin Jefferson. He's always going to get the ball. Well, if they can't get him the ball, you can't do anything about it. The next guy I have on my list here, and again, I know his production was down because he was suspended and coming back from an injury, but Rashee Rice. Now that situation has changed incredibly, drastically, because Mahomes is injured. He tore his ACL very late in the season, so we might not see him for the first month and a half. That really hurts Rice's production. We saw it towards the end of the last season when Mahomes was out. What kind of advice are you looking for, Nate? I have all kinds of advice. I have all the advice you need. That's why we're here on the channel. We're looking at the roles and the system changes and where the production level is going to be for guys, so newbies can come in here and have a understanding on what to look for and come draft time. But Rashee Rice, 53 receptions, 571 yards, 5 touchdowns. Those are stats down. And I know, like I said, the suspension had a lot to do with that. He didn't even play till like week 9 or week 10. Also recovering from that ACL injury that he had last year or 2 years ago in 2024. But with no Mahomes, it's really hard to get on board with the Chiefs offense. Now, Mahomes might be one of the better quarterbacks to ever play the game. He's got 3 Super Bowls with the Chiefs under Andy Reid. We know Andy Reid is one of the best coaches in the league. It's really hard to believe he doesn't have a Super Bowl with the Eagles, which is crazy to me. But he got Mahomes. They got three rings. But yeah, with as far as the production for the receivers and the running backs, and including Travis Kelce, when I said it in the last episode, where the entire tight end. The entire tight end group as a whole, outside of Trey McBride, is almost becoming irrelevant in fantasy. When you're in a situation like that, when your quarterback gets hurt and he's not going to play for the first month, maybe 2 months, you're just in trouble. You're just in trouble drafting Rashee Rice, and he's probably a high draft pick too. That now, if you were in a position to where you were okay to wait for him to come back from his suspension last year, you got some really good value out of him. He was targeted a ton. But again, that situation changes, and that's the biggest point that we make here on the channel is we look for the changing situations, and that is a big situation where they don't have a starting quarterback. I don't even remember who their second string quarterback is. I think it's Gardner Minshew, if I'm not mistaken. But he wasn't able to produce anything for anybody. So that really kind of hurt the value there. But as far as if you're new and if you're new to fantasy football and you're looking for success, I think not having a losing season is a success for your first time. You might not make the playoffs, but at least you kind of get the idea. But if you're looking to, this is the point that I started this channel because I want to help people prepare for their draft day, and the biggest things is a lot of people just overlook everything that I've talked about so far in the channel. The coaching changes, the role changes, where the volume is going to be, but when you're it's good to look at rankings the day before, but follow along long term. My entire journey leading up to draft day is gonna help you prepare for your fantasy draft come August or early September, whenever your drafts are set. And I can get that sometimes it gets frustrating too if you don't win. You kind of get this, oh, I hate fantasy football, I'm not good at it type of thing. But I've been doing fantasy football since 2008, 2009. So the coming up on almost 20 years of fantasy football. But yeah, the biggest thing is just trust your gut. If you think you want to draft a guy, just no shit. If you get a gut feeling on a guy, just draft him. Don't second guess it. Just go into it, because when you start second guessing, then panic sets in, and then what we like to call panic picks, and it throws off the entire flow of the draft. Have a couple guys in mind, but also have a backup plan. This is kind of the reason, like I said, this is the reason why I started the channel in the first place and started the front office podcast, is to help you on your draft day, and to make it a lot easier for you, so you don't panic, so you have a plan and you're prepared going into draft day, because draft day never goes according to it never goes perfectly. You're never going to get that guy that you set eyes on, unless you just draft with a bunch of idiots. Then it is what it is. But if you're new to it, and if you're new to it and you want to keep giving it a try, then definitely tag along and catch the episodes and check out the YouTube, and all your fantasy advice will be all in one place for you. The last guy I have on my list here for early red flags, AJ Brown, another wide receiver. He plays for the Eagles now. I know Titans fans hate to hear his name, because he is a very, very good receiver. but a lot of his production is way down. 78 receptions, just over 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns, and yes, that's still productive. Still productive, but that offense really kind of lost their identity. They struggled. They got knocked out of the playoffs. And AJ Brown didn't really see an uptick in target shares and volume until he threw a hissy fit. I don't like that these guys in the NFL voice their opinions like that. Football is a team game. If you're not happy winning games, then I don't know what you're doing. AJ Brown is a very, very talented receiver. Again, they have Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley, who also they take a lot of touches away from receivers because they're run heavy team. Now, I had Saquon Barkley as a red flag on my list, but he was out of the top 10 in fantasy, which is really uncharacteristic for him, especially after a 2,000-yard season the year before. But AJ Brown has all the talent in the world. Big guy, contested catch guy, can definitely make the plays that are needed to be made for any offense. But yeah, it's an evolving game. The game evolves. Teams get wise to what's happening. When a guy is open about his usage and not getting the ball, and that becomes a problem in the locker room. Guys don't want to be around that, and having played football in my youth, I say youth like I'm 90 years old. I feel it sometimes. But yeah, it's just looking at the situation. They lost their identity early on. They kind of found it a little bit at the end of the season there, but they ran more. They gave Saquon the ball more. Jalen Hurts, we saw him not score as many touchdowns as he usually does. AJ Brown, 7 touchdowns is still a decent number, but it's just that evolving offenses, that distribution, it just, that'll quietly shift, the target share. And they have 2 really talented receivers, AJ Brown and Devonta Smith on the other side. And they have a really talented tight end, Dallas Goedert. But like I said, tight ends are becoming irrelevant. That's one piece of advice I have for you starting fantasy if you want to get into it. Do not draft a tight end early. They don't matter. They're becoming an irrelevant position group, especially in fantasy football. Target share is just way down for tight ends across the board, unless you're Trey McBride, who had like 1,300 yards this year. Yeah, there was speculation that AJ Brown could become a Bill. I saw a report that said why this trade makes sense, to get AJ Brown over to the Buffalo Bills to give Josh Allen another weapon. It's probably the best weapon he's ever seen. Better than Stephon Diggs, in my opinion. But like I said, when those market costs are high, the role stability isn't guaranteed. And with AJ Brown, that is an offense that the stability is not guaranteed, especially when you see guys like Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley take a lot of red zone stuff. You're not really getting the red zone target shares, and the points aren't coming. Now, I believe AJ Brown did finish in the top 10 fantasy production. The touchdowns helped for sure. But yeah, they kind of lost their identity. But yeah, those are the 3 red flags that I have this year. Right off the bat: Justin Jefferson, Rashee Rice, AJ Brown. Diggs couldn't win a Super Bowl. We saw that. Drake May is not him. Stephon Diggs went to 2 new teams. After the Bills, he went to the Texans, tore his ACL, and then went to the Patriots. And they ultimately walked into the playoffs and the Super Bowl, and Seattle took them behind the barn. But yeah, you guys, I appreciate you being here. This is episode 3 of the Front Office Podcast. We are live every Sunday and Tuesday. Those are my early risers and my early red flags. Appreciate you for sticking around. Thank you guys for joining me on the Front Office Podcast. I am Pistols. This is episode 3. Look for episode 4 will be live on Tuesday, same time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Yeah, thank you guys for joining me.